Peter Collins parked his old blue truck in front of his small house and turned off the engine. He sat there for a moment, not wanting to go inside. The bill in his hand showed he was 3 months behind on his mortgage. At 42, his life was falling apart. His construction business was failing. No one was hiring him for jobs anymore. The bank wanted money he didn't have. He looked at his watch. It was past 8 in the evening. Linda would be mad again. This was the 3rd time this week he came home late. It wasn't because he was working. There was no work. He had been at Joe's bar, trying to drink away his problems. Peter got out of his truck and walked slowly to his front door. The yard was a mess. He used to take pride in keeping it nice, but now weeds grew everywhere. He didn't care anymore. Inside, Linda was sitting at the kitchen table. She didn't look up when he came in. "There's no food," she said. "I didn't cook." Peter nodded. He wasn't hungry anyway. "It's fine." "No, it's not fine, Peter. Nothing is fine." Linda finally looked at him. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. "I got a call from the school today. They said if we don't pay Amy's tuition by next week, she can't go back." Peter felt a pain in his chest. Amy was their 12-year-old daughter. She went to a private school because she was very smart. They had always found a way to pay for it before. "I'll figure something out," he said. "How? You can't even pay our bills. Your business is dead. You spend all day at that bar." Linda stood up. "I'm going to my sister's house tomorrow. I'm taking Amy with me." Peter wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He was a failure. He couldn't take care of his family anymore. "Maybe that's best for now," he said. Linda looked surprised. She expected him to fight. When he didn't, she seemed even more upset. She walked out of the kitchen without another word. Peter sat alone at the table. He took out his phone and checked his bank account. He had $212 left. It wasn't enough for anything. Not the mortgage, not Amy's school, not even food for the week. He also had another problem, a bigger one. Peter owed money to a man named Frank. Frank wasn't a bank. He was a loan shark. Peter had borrowed $5,000 from him 6 months ago to buy materials for a job. The job fell through. Peter couldn't pay Frank back. Now Frank wanted $8,000, and he was getting angry. Yesterday, 2 big men came to Peter's worksite. They didn't hurt him, but they made it clear that next time they would. Peter opened the fridge and found a beer. He drank it quickly, then had another. His phone rang. It was Frank. Peter didn't answer. Frank left a message. "2 more days, Collins. Then we're coming for something valuable. Maybe that pretty wife of yours." Peter threw his phone across the room. It hit the wall but didn't break. He put his head in his hands. He needed money fast. But where could he get it? That's when he thought of Harold Gardner. Harold was an old rich man who lived in a big house on River Road. Peter had done some work for him last year, fixing his roof and bathroom. Harold was at least 80 years old and lived alone. His wife had died years ago. He had no children. Peter remembered seeing cash in Harold's house. The old man didn't trust banks. He kept money in a safe in his study. While working there, Peter had seen Harold open it once. Inside were stacks of cash and some jewelry. Peter finished his beer and got another. A plan was forming in his mind. It was a bad plan, a wrong plan, but he was desperate. The next morning, Peter told Linda he was going to try to find work. Instead, he drove to Harold Gardner's neighborhood. The old man's house was big and white, sitting on a hill overlooking the river. Peter parked his truck down the street and watched. At exactly 9:30, Harold came out his front door. He was thin and walked with a cane, but he moved well for his age. He got into his car, a fancy black Mercedes, and drove away. Peter knew from working at the house that Harold went to the country club every morning. He played cards with other old rich men and came back around noon. Peter drove around the area, thinking. He passed over the Riverdale Bridge, an old stone bridge that crossed over the deepest part of the river. Below it were sharp rocks and fast water. No one would survive a fall from it. The bridge gave Peter an idea. A terrible idea. He couldn't rob Harold at his house. There might be cameras now or a new alarm system. But what if he caught Harold somewhere else? Somewhere quiet, like the old bridge? Peter spent the next few days watching Harold's house. He learned the old man's routine. Every Thursday evening, Harold visited his wife's grave at the cemetery across the river. He always walked there and back, crossing over Riverdale Bridge. He said the exercise was good for him. What Peter didn't know was that he wasn't the only one watching. Kevin Moore was 10 years old. He was small for his age and quiet. The other kids at school sometimes picked on him. Kevin didn't like sports or video games like most boys. He liked to fish and read comic books. His parents thought he went to baseball practice after school, but he didn't. He went to his secret place under Riverdale Bridge. Kevin had found a spot where he could climb under the bridge from the bank. There was a small ledge there where he could sit. No one could see him from above or from the shore. He would bring his fishing pole and his backpack with snacks and comics. It was his special place where no one bothered him. On Thursday afternoon, Kevin went to his spot under the bridge. He had been there for about an hour when he heard a car stop on the bridge above him. This was strange because cars usually just drove across. Kevin stayed very still and quiet. He heard a man get out of the car. The man walked across the bridge, and then Kevin heard the car door shut again. The car drove away. Kevin was curious but also a little scared. He stayed on his ledge reading his comic book and occasionally casting his fishing line into the water. As the sun began to set, Kevin knew he should go home. His parents expected him back by dinner time, but just as he was packing up his things, he heard footsteps on the bridge again. He froze. Above him, Peter Collins had returned. He had parked his truck in the woods nearby and walked back to the bridge. He knew Harold would be coming back from the cemetery soon. The bridge was the perfect spot. It was getting dark. There were no houses nearby. No cars had passed in the last 20 minutes. Peter felt sick to his stomach. He had never hurt anyone before. But he kept thinking about Frank's threat against Linda, about Amy's school, about his failing business. He needed money now, and Harold Gardner had plenty to spare. Peter hid behind a large oak tree at the end of the bridge. He had a ski mask in his pocket, but he hadn't put it on yet. He was still trying to convince himself to go through with his plan. Under the bridge, Kevin heard more footsteps. These were different. Slower, with a tap-tap sound. It was the sound of someone walking with a cane. Harold Gardner was crossing the bridge on his way home from visiting his wife's grave. He stopped in the middle of the bridge, as he often did, to look at the water below. The evening was peaceful. Harold thought about his wife. He missed her every day, even after 5 years. Peter saw Harold stop on the bridge. The old man was alone. It was now or never. Peter put on the ski mask and stepped out from behind the tree. Kevin held his breath. Something was happening above him. He could sense it. He pressed himself against the underside of the bridge, trying to see through the small gaps between the planks. What happened next would change all their lives forever. Peter stepped onto the bridge, his heart beating fast. The ski mask felt hot on his face. He pulled it down lower to make sure Harold couldn't see his eyes. He had a small knife in his pocket, but he didn't want to use it. He just wanted to scare the old man into giving him money. Harold Gardner stood still, looking at the water below. He didn't hear Peter coming. His hearing wasn't as good as it used to be. He was thinking about his late wife, Mary. They had been married for 52 years before cancer took her. Every Thursday he brought fresh flowers to her grave and told her about his week. Peter was 10 feet away when Harold finally sensed someone behind him. The old man turned slowly, leaning on his cane. "Who's there?" Harold asked, squinting in the dim light. Peter stepped closer. "Don't make any noise," he said, trying to make his voice sound deeper than it was. "I need your money, all of it, your wallet, your watch, everything." Harold didn't look scared. He looked sad. "Young man, is this what you've come to? Robbing old men on bridges?" Peter hadn't expected this reaction. He thought Harold would be terrified. Instead, the old man seemed disappointed, like a grandfather who had caught his grandson doing something wrong. "Just give me your wallet," Peter said. His voice shook a little. Harold sighed. "I only have about $40. I don't carry much cash these days." He reached slowly into his back pocket and took out a worn leather wallet. "You can have it, but I hope you find a better path than this." Under the bridge, Kevin could hear everything. He was frozen with fear. He wanted to run away, but he was afraid they would hear him. He also wanted to help the old man. But what could a small 10-year-old boy do against a grown man with a mask? Kevin stayed still and kept listening, hoping the man would just take the money and leave. Peter took the wallet from Harold. He opened it quickly. There were a few bills inside, just as Harold had said. Peter felt angry. This wasn't enough. This wouldn't solve any of his problems. "Where's the rest?" Peter demanded. "I know you're rich, you live in that big house, you have money." Harold shook his head. "My money is in the bank, young man. Or invested. I don't carry thousands of dollars with me on evening walks." Peter grabbed Harold's arm. "Your watch, then. And that ring." He pointed to the gold wedding band on Harold's left hand. Harold's face changed. He wasn't sad anymore. He was angry. "You can take my money, but not my wedding ring. Mary gave me this 53 years ago. I'm not giving it to you or anyone else." He pulled his arm away from Peter with surprising strength for an old man. Then he raised his cane, not to hit Peter, but to point at him. "You should leave now before you do something you'll regret forever." Peter panicked. This wasn't going as planned. He needed money badly, and this old man was standing there giving him life advice instead of handing over valuables. Peter grabbed for the cane, thinking it might be worth something. Harold held onto it tightly. They struggled, pulling the cane back and forth between them. Harold was stronger than he looked, but Peter was younger and desperate. Peter pulled hard, and Harold lost his balance. The old man stumbled backward toward the edge of the bridge. Peter saw what was happening but couldn't stop it, or maybe in that moment he didn't want to stop it. A horrible thought flashed in his mind. If Harold fell, all his money would go to someone. Maybe the state. Peter could claim to be a distant relative. It was a crazy idea, but Peter wasn't thinking clearly. Harold teetered at the edge of the bridge, his arms waving as he tried to regain his balance. Peter stood still, not helping, not pushing, just watching. For 3 long seconds it seemed like Harold might save himself. Then his foot slipped on the edge. With a short cry, Harold Gardner fell backward off the Riverdale Bridge. Kevin saw it happen through a gap in the wooden planks. He saw the old man's body fall past his hiding place. He heard the terrible sound when Harold hit the rocks below. Kevin put his hand over his mouth to stop himself from screaming. Tears filled his eyes. Peter stood at the edge of the bridge looking down. He couldn't see much in the growing darkness, but he knew Harold couldn't have survived that fall. The water was low this time of year, and there were large rocks at the bottom. What had he done? He hadn't meant to kill anyone. He just wanted money. But now a man was dead, and it was his fault. Peter felt sick. He took off the ski mask and wiped sweat from his face. Under the bridge, Kevin saw Peter's face clearly in the last light of day. He recognized him. Peter had come to Kevin's school last year to fix some broken windows. Kevin had watched him work during recess. He would never forget that face now. Peter put the ski mask in his pocket. He took Harold's wallet and watch. Then, he ran back to his truck hidden in the woods. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely put the key in the ignition. He drove away fast, not turning on his headlights until he was far from the bridge. Kevin waited until he couldn't hear the truck anymore. Then he climbed carefully from his hiding spot. He was shaking all over. He wanted to look for the old man to see if he could help him, but he was too scared. He knew from the sound that the old man was dead. Kevin grabbed his backpack and fishing pole and ran all the way home. Peter drove aimlessly for hours. His mind was racing. He had killed a man. He was a murderer now. If he got caught, he would go to prison for the rest of his life. He would never see Linda or Amy again. But maybe he wouldn't get caught. No one had seen him. He had worn a mask. He had parked far from the bridge. It was dark. Maybe people would think Harold fell by accident, or even that he jumped on purpose. The old man had been sad since his wife died. People might believe he finally decided to join her. Around midnight, Peter stopped at a gas station far from town. He went to the bathroom and looked at what he had taken from Harold. The wallet had $43 in it. The watch looked expensive, but was actually just gold-plated, not real gold. Together, they might be worth $200, not nearly enough to solve Peter's problems. There was something else in the wallet, a small photo of Harold and his wife. They looked happy. Peter stared at it for a long time. Then he threw up in the gas station toilet. When Peter got home, Linda was asleep, or pretending to be asleep. He took a long shower, scrubbing his skin until it was red, as if he could wash away what he had done. Then he lay awake all night staring at the ceiling. Kevin also couldn't sleep that night. He told his parents he wasn't feeling well, which was true. His mother felt his forehead and said he didn't have a fever, but she let him go to bed early. Kevin lay under his covers, thinking about what he had seen. Should he tell someone? His parents? The police? What if the bad man found out and came after him next? Kevin was just a kid. He didn't know what to do with a secret this big and scary, so he did nothing, at least for that night. He pulled his blanket over his head and tried to forget the sound of the old man hitting the rocks. The next morning, a fisherman found Harold Gardner's body. The police came. They put yellow tape around the area under the bridge. On the news, they said it might have been an accident. Or maybe the old man killed himself. They were investigating. Peter watched the news with Linda. She didn't know what he had done. He tried to act normal, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Linda asked if he was okay. He said he was just worried about money. I might have a job next week. He lied. Linda didn't look like she believed him, but she didn't say anything. She was tired of fighting. Kevin also saw the news. His parents talked about how sad it was. They had seen Harold around town sometimes. They said he was a nice man who gave money to the local schools and hospital. Kevin felt the secret growing heavier inside him. He should tell someone. But he was so scared. Both Peter and Kevin had decisions to make, and those decisions would change everything. 3 days passed since Harold Gardner fell from the bridge. Peter tried to act normal, but it was hard. He jumped at every sound. He couldn't sleep. When he did sleep, he had bad dreams about Harold falling and falling. Linda noticed something was wrong with Peter. "Are you sick?" she asked one morning when she found him sitting at the kitchen table at 5 a.m. staring at nothing. "I'm fine," Peter said. "Just worried about money." Linda sighed. "I'm still taking Amy to my sister's this weekend. We need some time apart, Peter. You need to figure things out." Peter nodded. He didn't argue. Part of him was glad they would be gone. He wouldn't have to pretend to be okay around them. That same morning, Kevin sat quietly at his breakfast table. He hadn't been to his secret fishing spot since that terrible evening. He told his parents he didn't feel like fishing anymore. They thought he was just going through a phase. "Do you want to go to the park today?" his mother asked. Kevin shook his head. "I have homework," he said, though it wasn't true. He just didn't want to leave the house. What if he saw that man, Peter, somewhere? What if Peter saw him and somehow knew that Kevin had seen everything? Kevin's mother looked worried. "You've been very quiet lately. Is something bothering you? Is someone at school being mean to you?" Kevin wanted to tell her everything. The words were right there, ready to come out. But he was too scared. What if Peter came after his family? What if the police didn't believe him? What if everyone got mad at him for being at the bridge instead of at baseball practice? "I'm fine, Mom," Kevin said. "Just tired." After breakfast, Kevin went to his room and turned on his small TV. The local news was on. They were talking about Harold Gardner again. "Police are now investigating the death of local businessman Harold Gardner as a possible homicide," the news lady said. "Sources say Mr. Gardner's wallet and watch were missing when his body was found. suggesting he may have been robbed before falling from Riverdale Bridge. Kevin sat up straight. The police knew something bad had happened to Mr. Gardner. Maybe they would find Peter without Kevin having to say anything. The news showed a picture of Harold Gardner. He had white hair and kind eyes. He was smiling in the photo. Kevin felt sad looking at him. Then the news showed a picture of Riverdale Bridge. Kevin could see his secret spot underneath it. A shiver ran down his back. "Anyone with information is asked to call the police," the news lady said, and a phone number appeared on the screen. Kevin wrote it down on a piece of paper. Just in case, he told himself. Across town, Peter was also watching the news. His heart beat faster when he heard the police were treating Harold's death as a possible homicide. They knew Harold had been robbed, but they didn't say anything about suspects. Maybe they didn't have any clues about who did it. Peter's phone rang. It was Frank, the man he owed money to. "Collins," Frank said when Peter answered. "My patience is gone. I need my money today, all of it." "I don't have it yet," Peter said, his voice shaking. "I need more time." "No more time," Frank said. "My boys will come see you this afternoon. Have the money ready or things will get very ugly." The call ended. Peter put his head in his hands. He was trapped. The police might be looking for him. Frank's men were definitely coming for him. He had no money. Linda and Amy were leaving. His life was falling apart. Then Peter had an idea. If the police thought Harold was murdered for his money, maybe Peter could use that. Harold was rich. He must have bank accounts, credit cards. Peter still had Harold's wallet with his driver's license and credit cards inside. Maybe he could use them somehow before the police canceled everything. It was a crazy, desperate idea. But Peter was a desperate man. He drove to an ATM on the other side of town where no one knew him. He wore a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He tried using Harold's ATM card to get money. He tried different passwords, Harold's birthday, his address, simple codes like 1234. Nothing worked. Next, he tried using Harold's credit card at a gas station. The clerk asked for ID. Peter left quickly, saying he forgot his wallet. Peter was running out of options. He decided to try one more thing. He drove to a small bank in a neighboring town. He went inside and spoke to a young woman at a desk. "I need to access my uncle's account," Peter said. "He's in the hospital. He asked me to get some money for him." Peter showed her Harold's ID. "That's him. I don't look like him because we're not blood relatives. He married my aunt." The young woman looked at the ID. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't give you access without your uncle's permission. He would need to come in person or call us." "He can't come in. He's very sick," Peter said. He was sweating now. "Can I call him for you? He'll tell you it's okay." "That would work," the woman said. "We just need verbal authorization." Peter went outside, pretending to call Harold. He came back in 5 minutes later. "He's not answering. The nurses must be with him. I'll try again later." The woman looked suspicious now. "Sir, I need to keep this ID. It seems very worn, and we need to verify it's authentic." Peter panicked. "No, I need that back." He grabbed the ID from her hand and ran out of the bank. As he drove away, he saw the woman on the phone, probably calling the police. He had made a huge mistake. Now the police would be looking for someone trying to use Harold Gardner's ID and credit cards. Back at home, Kevin finally made a decision. He couldn't keep this secret anymore. It was making him sick. He had to tell someone. He took out the paper with the police phone number. His hands were shaking as he picked up the phone. He dialed the number. "Oakville Police Department." A woman's voice answered. Kevin almost hung up, but then he thought of Mr. Gardner's kind face on the news. He took a deep breath. "I saw what happened to Mr. Gardner at the bridge," Kevin said in a small voice. "I saw everything." The policewoman's voice changed, becoming more serious. "Can you tell me your name, please?" "Kevin Moore," he said. "I'm 10 years old." "Kevin, you're very brave to call. Can I send an officer to talk to you? Is your mom or dad home?" "My mom is here," Kevin said. He was crying now, but also feeling relieved. "I'll tell her." When Kevin's mother found out what he had seen, she was shocked and scared. She hugged him tightly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. "I was afraid," Kevin said. "The man might hurt us." "No one will hurt you," she promised. "The police will catch him." The police came to Kevin's house. A nice lady officer named Susan talked to Kevin while his mother sat beside him. Kevin told her everything. How he had been fishing under the bridge, how he saw the man in the mask struggle with Mr. Gardner, how he saw Mr. Gardner fall, and how he saw the man's face when he took off the mask. "Do you think you would recognize this man if you saw him again?" Officer Susan asked. Kevin nodded. "His name is Peter. He fixed windows at my school last year." Officer Susan looked surprised. "You know his name?" "I heard the principal call him that when he was working at school," Kevin said. "He has a blue truck with the name Collins Construction on the side." Officer Susan wrote everything down. Then, she showed Kevin some pictures on her computer. "Is the man you saw one of these people?" Kevin looked carefully at each picture. Then he pointed at one. "That's him. That's Peter." The picture was of Peter Collins. The police already suspected him because someone at the bank had reported a man trying to use Harold Gardner's ID. Now they had an eyewitness who saw him on the bridge when Harold fell. Officer Susan thanked Kevin. "You've been very brave," she said. "Thanks to you, we can catch the bad man who hurt Mr. Gardner." After the police left, Kevin felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from him. His mother hugged him again. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about going to the bridge instead of baseball," Kevin said. "We'll talk about that later," his mother said. "Right now, I'm just glad you're safe." While Kevin was talking to the police, Peter was at home, packing a bag. He knew he had to leave town. The bank worker had surely reported him. It wouldn't take long for the police to figure out who he was. He was putting clothes in a duffel bag when he heard cars outside. He looked out the window and saw 3 police cars in front of his house. Officers were getting out, putting on bulletproof vests. Peter's legs felt weak. This was it. They had found him. There was nowhere to run. Peter watched through the window as police officers surrounded his house. His heart was beating so fast he could barely breathe. For a moment he thought about running out the back door. But where would he go? They would catch him eventually. There was no escape. A voice came through a megaphone from outside. "Peter Collins, this is the police. We have a warrant for your arrest. Come out with your hands up." Peter's phone rang. It was the police calling him. With shaking hands, he answered it. "Mr. Collins, this is Officer Martinez. We need you to come outside with your hands visible. Do you understand?" "Yes," Peter said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm coming out." He put the phone down. This was the end of everything. He would go to jail for killing Harold Gardner. He would never see Linda or Amy again, all because of one terrible moment on that bridge. Peter walked slowly to the front door. He opened it and stepped outside with his hands raised. Immediately, 4 officers approached him with guns pointed at him. They told him to lie face down on the ground. Peter did as they said. They handcuffed him and read him his rights as they put Peter in the police car. He saw his neighbors watching from their houses. Some were taking videos with their phones. His shame was complete. Everyone would know what he had done. At the police station, they took Peter to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. They took his fingerprints and a photo. Then 2 detectives came in to question him. One was a tall man with gray hair named Detective Rogers. The other was a woman with short brown hair named Detective Chen. "Mr. Collins," Detective Rogers said, "you're in serious trouble. We have evidence that you were involved in the death of Harold Gardner." Peter looked down at the table. He couldn't meet their eyes. "Someone saw you on the bridge that night," Detective Chen said. "They identified you from a photo. We also have reports that you tried to use Mr. Gardner's credit cards and ID after his death." Peter knew they had him. There was no point in lying anymore. "It was an accident," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to kill him." The detectives exchanged a look. "Why don't you tell us what happened?" Detective Rogers said. Peter told them everything. How he needed money because of his failing business and his debt to Frank. How he knew Harold Gardner had money. How he had planned to rob him on the bridge. How they struggled over the cane, and Harold fell. "I didn't push him," Peter insisted, tears running down his face. "He lost his balance. I could have helped him, but I didn't. I just watched him fall." "That's still murder," Detective Chen said. "You created the situation that led to his death, and you did nothing to prevent it, when you could have." Peter nodded. He knew she was right. "Who saw me?" he asked suddenly. "You said someone identified me. Who was it?" The detectives didn't answer. "That's not important right now," Detective Rogers said. "What matters is that we have enough evidence to charge you with murder and robbery." They took Peter to a cell after that. He sat on the small bed and thought about how his life had fallen apart so quickly. Just a week ago, he had been a normal man with problems, but also a family and a home. Now he was a murderer sitting in jail. Meanwhile, Kevin was at home with his parents. After he had talked to the police, his mother called his father at work. He came home right away. They both hugged Kevin and told him how brave he was for telling the truth. "I was so scared," Kevin admitted. "I thought the bad man might hurt me if I told anyone." "You did the right thing," his father said. "The police will make sure he can't hurt anyone else now." Kevin's parents were upset that he had been going to the bridge instead of baseball practice. They grounded him for a week for lying to them, but they weren't too angry because they understood he had been through something terrible. That evening, Officer Susan called Kevin's mother. She told her that they had arrested Peter Collins. He had confessed to being on the bridge when Harold Gardner fell. Kevin wouldn't have to testify in court because Peter had admitted what he did. Kevin felt relieved when his mother told him this news. He had been worried about having to see Peter again and talk about that night in front of a lot of people. "Is Mr. Gardner's family sad?" Kevin asked his mother. "Mr. Gardner didn't have any close family," she explained. "His wife died a few years ago and they never had children, but I'm sure his friends are very sad." This made Kevin feel even worse for Mr. Gardner. To die alone with no family to miss you seemed very sad to him. The next day there was a knock at Kevin's door. His mother opened it and found a man in a suit standing there. He introduced himself as Mr. Lawson, Harold Gardner's lawyer. "I understand your son is the one who witnessed what happened on the bridge," Mr. Lawson said. "Is it possible for me to speak with him briefly?" Kevin's mother was hesitant, but Mr. Lawson explained that he wasn't there to upset Kevin. He just wanted to thank him for coming forward with the truth. Kevin came to the door. Mr. Lawson smiled at him. "Hello, Kevin. I wanted to meet the brave young man who helped solve this case." Kevin didn't feel brave, but he said hello politely. "Mr. Gardner was my client for over 30 years, Mr. Lawson said. "He was a good man who helped many people in this town. Thanks to you, his killer will face justice." Kevin nodded, not sure what to say. "There's something else," Mr. Lawson continued. "Mr. Gardner's will is quite interesting. Most of his money goes to charity, as he had no close family. But there's a provision in it that I think applies to you." Kevin and his mother looked confused. "The will states that if anyone helps bring justice in the event of harm coming to Mr. Gardner, that person should receive a reward of $50,000, Mr. Lawson explained. "I believe you qualify for that reward, Kevin." Kevin's eyes widened. He had never heard of so much money in his life. His mother put her hand on his shoulder, equally shocked. "That's very generous," she said. But Kevin didn't come forward for a reward. "I understand," Mr. Lawson said. But Mr. Gardner was always careful to reward those who did the right thing. He would want Kevin to have this money for his future, perhaps for college. In the end, Kevin's parents accepted the reward. On his behalf, they put it in a special account that Kevin couldn't touch until he was 18. They told him it would help pay for his education someday. Kevin didn't fully understand what the money meant for his future. What he did understand was that Mr. Gardner had been a kind man even after his death. This made Kevin feel a little better about what had happened. At the county jail, Peter was adjusting to his new reality. Linda came to visit him once. She was angry and sad and didn't know what to say to him. She told him she and Amy were moving to her sister's house permanently. Peter understood. What woman would want to stay married to a murderer? Peter's lawyer told him that because he had confessed and showed remorse, he might not get life in prison. He might get 20 or 30 years instead. As if that made a difference. By the time he got out, he would be an old man with nothing and no one. One day, as Peter sat in his cell, a guard brought him a newspaper. There was an article about Harold Gardner's will. It said that most of his money was going to local charities, the hospital, schools, and a home for orphaned children. The article mentioned that Gardner had lost most of his fortune in recent years due to bad investments. He wasn't as rich as everyone thought. Peter put his head in his hands. All this, a man's death, his own destroyed life, for nothing. Harold Gardner hadn't even been rich in the end. The irony was too painful to bear. As Peter contemplated his ruined life, Kevin was slowly returning to normal. He started going to baseball practice for real this time. He made some friends there. He still liked fishing, but he found a new spot, in a small pond near his house. Sometimes he thought about what had happened at the bridge. It still scared him, but not as much as before. He had learned something important. Telling the truth, even when it was hard and scary, was always the right thing to do. Both Peter and Kevin had been changed forever by what happened on Riverdale Bridge that evening. Their lives had taken very different paths because of the choices they made. Peter chose greed and desperation. Kevin chose truth and bravery. Their stories would continue, but the most important chapter had already been written. 6 months passed. Peter Collins sat in a courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit. Today was his sentencing. He had already pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and robbery. Now he would find out how many years he would spend in prison. The judge was a serious woman with gray hair and glasses. She looked at Peter for a long time before she spoke. Peter couldn't meet her eyes. He looked down at his hands instead. "Mr. Collins," the judge said, "you took a man's life. Harold Gardner was 80 years old. He had lived a long and good life, but he deserved to live out his remaining years in peace. You took that from him, not for survival or in self-defense, but for money." Peter nodded slightly. Everything she said was true. However, the judge continued, "I have taken into account that you have expressed remorse. You have no prior criminal record. You confessed to your crime. These factors work in your favor." Peter looked up, a small spark of hope in his eyes. "I sentence you to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 years, the judge said. "You will also pay restitution to Mr. Gardner's estate in the amount of $50,000, 25 years. Peter would be 67 when he got out if he served the full sentence. His life as he knew it was over. The bailiff led him away in handcuffs. As Peter was taken back to his cell, he thought about how one bad decision had destroyed everything. He thought about Linda and Amy, who had moved away. Linda had filed for divorce. She told him Amy didn't want to visit him in prison. His daughter was ashamed of him. Peter couldn't blame her. He also thought about the boy, Kevin. Peter had learned during the investigation that a 10-year-old boy had seen everything from under the bridge, the boy who identified him to police. Peter wasn't angry at Kevin. The boy had only told the truth. Peter was the one who had done something terrible. Across town, Kevin was at school. He was in 5th grade now. Things were better for him. He had friends. He played baseball for real. He still liked fishing, but not under bridges anymore. Kevin's parents had used some of the reward money to get him a counselor. The counselor helped Kevin talk about what he had seen on the bridge. The bad dreams came less often now. Sometimes Kevin still thought about Mr. Gardner and felt sad. But the counselor said that was normal. It was good to feel sad about sad things. After school, Kevin went to a ceremony at the town park. They were dedicating a new playground built with money from Harold Gardner's will. Many people from town were there. Kevin and his parents stood near the back of the crowd. Mr. Lawson, Harold's lawyer, spoke about how Harold had loved children, even though he never had any of his own. He said the playground was a way for Harold to keep bringing happiness to the town even after he was gone. Then Mr. Lawson said something that surprised Kevin. "We have a special guest here today. Someone who helped make sure justice was done for Harold. Kevin Moore, would you please come up here?" Kevin looked at his parents, unsure. They nodded encouragingly. Kevin walked slowly to the front. His heart was beating fast. He didn't like being the center of attention. Mr. Lawson put his hand on Kevin's shoulder. This young man showed remarkable courage. When many adults might have stayed silent out of fear, Kevin told the truth about what he saw. Because of him, Harold's killer was brought to justice. People clapped. Kevin felt his face get hot. He wasn't used to being called brave. "To honor this, we're adding something special to the playground," Mr. Lawson continued. He pointed to a small plaque on the side of the new slide. It said, "In memory of Harold Gardner and in honor of Kevin Moore, whose courage reminds us that one person can make a difference." Kevin read the words slowly. He felt strange seeing his name there. He hadn't done anything special, he thought. He had just told the truth. After the ceremony, people came up to Kevin and his parents. They shook his hand and said nice things to him. A newspaper reporter took his picture next to the plaque. Kevin smiled politely, but he was glad when it was over and he could go home. That night, Kevin asked his mother a question that had been on his mind. "Mom, do you think Mr. Gardner would be happy about the playground?" "I think he would," she said. "Mr. Lawson told me that Harold always wanted to build something like this for the town's children. He just never got around to it while he was alive." "And the plaque with my name," Kevin said. "Is that okay? I didn't do anything special." His mother sat on the edge of his bed. "Kevin, what you did was very special. You saw something terrible happen. You were scared. It would have been easier to say nothing. But you told the truth even though it was hard. That is brave." Kevin thought about this. Maybe his mother was right. He hadn't felt brave at the time. He had just felt like the secret was too big to keep inside him. Far away in a state prison, Peter Collins lay on his narrow bed. His cell was small. He shared it with another man who didn't talk much. Peter was still adjusting to prison life. It was hard. He missed simple things like taking a walk outside whenever he wanted or eating a meal in private. Peter had started writing in a journal. His counselor in prison suggested it might help him deal with his feelings. Today, he wrote about Harold Gardner and about the boy, Kevin. He wrote about how one moment of desperation had changed so many lives. He wrote about his regret and his shame. Peter didn't expect forgiveness from anyone. He knew what he had done was unforgivable, but he hoped that someday he might find a way to make some small amends. Maybe he could help other prisoners. Maybe he could warn young men about how quickly a bad decision can ruin a life. He had a lot of time to think about it. 25 years. 1 year after Harold Gardner's death, the town held a small memorial service at the cemetery. Not many people came. Harold had outlived most of his friends. But Kevin and his parents were there. Mr. Lawson came too, and a few people who had known Harold from his business and charity work. They stood around Harold's grave, which had a simple headstone. It showed his name, the dates of his birth and death, and the words, "He gave generously and lived kindly." Kevin placed a small bunch of flowers on the grave. He hadn't known Harold Gardner in life, but he felt connected to him now. In a strange way, Harold had changed Kevin's life. The reward money would help Kevin go to college someday. The experience had taught Kevin about courage and truth. And sometimes, when Kevin felt afraid to do the right thing, he thought about Harold and found strength. After the service, Kevin and his parents walked back to their car. As they passed the Riverdale Bridge, Kevin looked at it. He didn't feel scared anymore. It was just a bridge now, not a place of nightmares. "Are you okay?" his father asked, noticing Kevin looking at the bridge. Kevin nodded. "I'm okay," he said, and he meant it. Life moved on in the small town. Peter Collins was largely forgotten except as a cautionary tale. Harold Gardner was remembered through the playground and the charitable foundation that bore his name. And Kevin Moore grew up, carrying with him the lessons he had learned from that terrible night under the bridge. Sometimes the truth is hard. Sometimes doing the right thing is scary. But as Kevin had learned, and as Peter had learned too late, our choices define us. One moment of weakness can destroy a life. One moment of courage can change the world, even if just a small corner of it. And somewhere, perhaps, Harold Gardner looked down on the town he had loved, on the boy who had brought his killer to justice, and on the man who had taken his life but was now paying for his crime. And perhaps with the wisdom and kindness that had marked his long life, Harold forgave them all.